Hello and welcome to All Around the World, presented by Crushing Comics. I'm your host, Crisis with a K, and I'm here in Wellington, New Zealand, and to get new books onto these shelves, they've got to get hauled around the world to me, thus the name of the show. This is two books that I have some specific things to say about. One is WYND by James Tynion IV and Michael Dialynas, and the other is the first epic collection for Namor, the Submariner. So I'll talk about WYND first, and then we will talk about Namor, the Submariner. WYND. I love when people make YA, young readers, young audiences, all ages books that feel like they're something special that's going to last. I like myth making. That's not to say that I don't like funny books or jokey books or smaller stories, but I like when people create a world and within that world, they're like, this is a story you're going to really remember because I have imagined all of the different parts of it. And that's really what WYND is. Tynion has really imagined this very specific place. It's this town that's enclosed from the rest of the world, and they are very human first there. They don't want any creatures, any fairy folk, because they've had negative experiences in the past, and that's the way it's going to be. And they have a specific ruler, I think it's a duke, in the town, and everything's fine as long as everybody obeys those rules and the outsiders stay out. But what happens if you're an outsider yourself and you've been in this whole time and you lived in, and now you realize as you age and mature that everybody else wants you out? That's what WYND is about. And of course, you can hear that that metaphor works not just for fairy creatures. James Tynion, as a member of the LGBTQ community, he's an out bisexual man, absolutely writes his experiences and his feelings into books like this. And this kid in the book, it's not a spoiler because it happens on the first or second page. He's part fairy folk, and he is terribly, terribly worried that he is going to sprout wings one day and just turn into this giant raven person. He's sure it's going to happen. And he just feels like it's this terrible secret that the people that are really close to him kind of have an inkling about, but that he cannot possibly reveal because he will be hated, shunned, feared, and maybe even killed. So it works tremendously on a metaphorical level, and it's a really amazing, interesting, intriguing world. And I love Michael Dialynas, Michael Dialynas' character designs. I like them because they fit that fantasy trope where they're all different shapes and sizes. Some people are bean poles, some people are kind of rounder, but he doesn't do it where they're all just kind of like a reduction of a body type. It's not just like fat character, skinny character. Like they each have their own character to them and they're all different. And I think that makes it easy for a younger reader to track, right? Like we have to think about like why the styles that get used in these younger reader books get used the way they do. And part of it is so kids can tell the characters apart, right? If they all look too samey and they're all just built in a really similar way, it can be harder. And so part of what younger reader books do is make their characters visually distinct. Now, this is the special direct market edition. So I don't know what the bookshelf version looks like. This has a nice, spot gloss in the letters. I don't know if you can, there you can see it there. And on these characters here. This is book one. It is book one. And originally they were going to only release it in this format, but because of the pandemic, Boom was like, what can we release that's already in the can? And they realized, and plus Tiny was having a good year, and they realized they had this whole series in the can. And so they wound up releasing it as singles and then collecting it. This is, as you will note, a digest size. So I've never seen any of the singles because I read digital, but I assume the singles are bigger. But, digest sells to kids and to libraries. So that's the way they do it in digest size. It's book one. Book two is running in singles right now. It's pretty good. I don't know if it's as good as this. And unfortunately, this does kind of end on a cliffhanger. So you kind of do need to keep reading to book two. But I think this has enough satisfying plot that you could give it as a gift now and a kid would read it and appreciate it. It's really, and in addition to all that stuff I said, and he's going to be a fairy monster, he's worried about it, he also is a gay character. And it's wonderful. And he has some romance and he has some feelings. And it's wonderful to see that in a storybook setting no differently than you would see the crushes and the yearnings of a straight character in a fantasy setting. Let's have more of that too. So I could not more highly recommend this. I read, it's a little scary. It's definitely, when it gets to like the people that are chasing him down and want to kill him, it gets into a very mutant massacre kind of situation. So for that reason, I don't know if you could just hand it to a 6 or 7-year-old. That's the only thing that would really stop me from saying that. It was a little heavy for my 7-year-old and we started reading it probably right after she turned 7. I think I'm probably going to hold it maybe for her 8th birthday. And just because of the heaviness of other material we read through X-Men, she'll be ready for it then. But highly, highly recommended. I mean, you know, I do not let new books into my collection. I really don't buy comics physically that came out after 2015. It's digital. That's my world. But sometimes something is so remarkable and I want to support it and I want my kid to have it on her shelf. And so then it comes here physically, and WYND ticks all those boxes. Honestly, I think I would have bought it for myself, even if I didn't buy it for her. Now I'm kind of wondering if I should have got a second copy, but we'll cross that bridge. Okay, now we're talking about an epic collection. Submariner. Namor the Submariner. Enter the Submariner. Epic number 1. It's on the thinner side for an epic collection. And we're going to do the build stuff first, and then we're going to talk about the contents, because I have some things to say. The first thing that strikes me here is the cover boards. Again, these really light cover boards that already have a curl to them. That's too light, y'all. I mean, Wellington is a little damp as a place, but a cover board really should not have that much curl to it, which makes me just think that the stock is a little too light. The other thing is this paper. It's a really pleasing weight. I'm trying to find a page with a lot of white to see if there's show. There is some show, but we know that's normal. But here's the thing. It's too glossy for this material. It does not match the kind of paper they've done on any of the other Silver Age epics. It's too bright, too glossy. It's making the color feel even more vivid than it already is. It just doesn't seem right. So it has an X-Men issue in it, which I'll talk about why in a second. But let me pull out that X-Men book and just look. Well, first of all, this is a much older epic, but this paper is creamier. It's not as bright. I don't know if you hear anything apocalyptic. We're having like crazy hail. Oh boy, right now. Maybe I'll bring the camera over to the window in a minute. This is a little creamier. I just don't know if you're going to be able to see the difference on camera. But this is like a bright white. And it just doesn't quite work. So I don't know if I don't like the paper from a build quality, but I would expect this kind of paper on like a 1990s Fantastic Four comic, not on Submariner. So it just kind of feels like nobody thought about it. It just feels like they got the specs for an epic collection. They're like, put it on the press. And, you know, so it was printed by Fry Communications in February of 2021. Now, let's talk about the material for a second. This is from 1962 to 1966, which may be briefly puzzling you because Namor did not have his own series for most of that time. He didn't start appearing in Tales to Astonish until August 1965. So what is this 1962 through 1964 material? Well, Namor appeared starting in Fantastic Four #4 in the Silver Age in a revival of him as a Golden Age hero. Now, there were no kids probably who remembered him in 1961 as a Golden Age hero, because that was started, Marvel Comics #1, what was that, 1939, right? So this was, but he did continue through the war, and he came back in the 50s in the Atlas period. But he wasn't necessarily like a name seller on a spinner rack the way, Batman, who had been around through that whole period, was. But of all the characters from the Silver Age, Stan Lee was really focused on bringing back 2 of them. One was Captain America in Avengers, and also in issue #4, and Namor came back in Fantastic Four #4. And what's really interesting is Stan Lee takes him on this arc that runs through a little bit more than a dozen issues in the Silver Age, and it's a really complete arc. He's like forgotten who he is, and then he remembers who he is, and then he thinks, am I going to turn to my villainy again? And then he gets recruited by Magneto. Actually, I guess first comes, he's part of the Avengers finding Captain America. Then he kind of gets recruited by Magneto. And then at one point he's thinking like, am I going to drown New York again? And he fights Daredevil. This is a really complete arc, and it's never been collected in one place before. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 issues here. I think he makes a couple of other appearances, but they're not significant. And they've never been all in one place. And here's the thing. I know some people are going to be like, this double dips. I already have it because I have the X-Men and I have the Avengers and I have the Fantastic Four and I have Daredevil. First of all, you should not need 4 epic lines to understand Namor coming back. And second of all, it really shows how Stan Lee built him to the point that he could begin starring in his own book again, and kind of like remodeling him for the Silver Age. It's a really good read. It makes sense. It has an arc, and it's never been all in one place before. So I am strongly positive on this book, more so than the Silver Surfer epic one that reprints a lot of stuff. That was just Silver Silver kind of incidentally appearing in Fantastic Four. I don't know that we needed that all in one place. This I've always wanted. And of course I couldn't bind it myself because these are all like key Silver Age issues, but I love that they collected it. And if you've always wanted to read Silver Age Submariner from the start, this is really the start. You don't need any other background. You don't need to have read the Golden Age. Stan Lee will set you up with all of the stuff you need right from the beginning here. So I actually am super, super in favor of this. I just wish it was not this bright, blindingly white paper. Instead, maybe this slightly creamier paper. But I'm really happy to have it. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see the mapping of this. It dips 7 issues into that Tales to Astonish run, but he was only a co-feature in Tales to Astonish at that point alongside Hulk. So they're only half-issue long stories. So I would expect that the next one's going to get pretty deep into that, maybe all the way through the rest of the run. But then he has his own solo series, which I've got entirely on the shelf behind me here, that runs all the way through 72 issues. So that's going to be a few epics. And if the epics wanted to, they could press forward from there into Supervillain Team Up, where he appears next after this with Dr. Doom, which is somewhere on the shelf behind me because I remember we opened it up in Shelf Store. So this is a whole new line, and you have to wonder, why? Why Namor now? Usually Marvel doesn't do this stuff by mistake. And if you look around in the media environment, you can figure out why they've introduced a line. A lot of times it's because there's going to be a character in like a starring arc in a current book, and they want to give stores a comp title that they can sell to those people like, oh, I've never read any Namor before. What can I read him in? And they're like, oh, I've got his first appearance right here. They do that a lot. I know it sounds silly because like how many could possibly get cross-held, but if you look at Marvel's publishing history, when they bring out a collection kind of out of the blue, it very frequently ties into a current comic, or it ties into a media property, which makes you wonder, like, is Namor going to be coming in one of these new Marvel's MCU shows? I don't know, because really right now, he's only showing up a little bit in X-Men comics. He's not really super prominent. I guess Aaron has used him a bit in Avengers as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see where he pops up in the rest of 2021, because otherwise, why start a whole new epic line? But it's an epic line I'm happy to have. And by the way, the restoration on this cover is really cool. It's, you know, with slightly modernized coloring, as all of these Epic Collections covers are. But I think if you look at this against the X-Men one kind of just looks like a little like plasticky. The way that it's colored, it looks like a very like, oh, let's slap some modern colors. But this one, I think even the back cover just is really lovely and well considered. It doesn't feel like it's trying to fully do a modern cover look on this. It's just trying to do a modern color, but on a classic material. So let's see, color and art restoration. Oh, it's a whole crew of people. And it also has the note, these comics are presented as originally created. They may contain outdated depictions. Always nice to see that acknowledged by the folks at Marvel. So let me know, have you read WYND? Did I convince you to read WYND? Do you have a kid in your life who might love WYND? Because I'm a fan. And also, how are you feeling about the double dipping in this Namor Submariner epic? Because I'll tell you, in our next episode, we are also going to talk about some double dipping that happened in a new collection. I have it right here. It is the brand new Black Panther Marvel Masterworks #3, and it really close to fully duplicates the most recent Black Panther Epic Collection. But if you want to hear more about that, you'll have to tune into the next episode of Haul Around the World. I've been your host, Crisis with a K. Thanks so much for watching, and until I get to see you again, I hope very much that you are well.